All right, TCU and Stanford. We've got TCU 9-point favorites, 59 being the total in this game as they make the trip to Palo Alto. This opened 10.5. I agree with the move to Stanford. Stanford's going to be one of those teams, I think, that's going to be money makers this year. I don't know how many games they're going to win under Troy Taylor here in 2024, but I thought considering he was taking over something just, it was a rebuild job right from the beginning for him. And to see Stanford as competitive as they often were last year, I thought he did a solid job. They bring back Ashton Daniels at the quarterback spot. It's someone that definitely flashed some potential last year. He's certainly better than Justin Lamson, the other quarterback that got some playing time last year for the Cardinal. So I agree with Ashton Daniels getting the starting job. 8 interceptions. He does have to cut down on that, but he did have over 2,000 passing yards, 11 touchdowns. That's what you want to see. They do have to start over at running back. Cedric Irvin probably going to take over as far as the starting running back. Their top 2 backs from last year did not return to the team this season, so we'll see how they handle that. What I love about Stanford, though, is all 5 back on the offensive line. All 5 starters returning here for the Stanford O-line. I think they're going to be set up to have some success here. Eomanor, Bachmeyer, and Farrell, some pretty good receivers. They're going to be able to have some success moving this football. I think Daniels definitely has that potential. I know last year the offense wasn't great, but I expect them to definitely improve on the 20 points per game last year. And keep in mind, the schedule was a little bit difficult. Obviously, the defensive side of the football is where they had their issues, 38.4 points per game for Stanford last year. But they should improve there. 7 starters are back. Their leading tackler is back. That's the good news for them going into this first game of the year against TCU. I think when you look at the Horned Frogs, Josh Hoover is going to be returning at quarterback. He started as the backup last year and eventually ended up becoming the starter. He's another guy that has to cut down on interceptions, but he was pretty solid once he got in. They do have their top 2 receivers, Savion Williams, J.P. Richardson returning. Here's the one problem, the one starter for them back on the offensive line. He went transfer portal heavy as far as recruiting to the offensive line, so it's going to be lots of transfers in the mix here for TCU along the offensive line for Sonny Dykes. We'll see how that ends up transpiring. The defensive side of the football for TCU, of course, last year, after going, it's what a high of highs 2 years ago, national championship game, and then last year, just the bottom fell out for TCU, and defense was a big part of the problem. Almost 30 points per game, not what you want to see. They gave up way too much as far as almost 500 total yards allowed per game last year. They do have 6 starters back on the defensive side of the football, but when I look at that defense, Sonny Dykes has never put an emphasis to me on great defenses. I think even when they went to the national championship game 2 years ago, a lot of that was they bent but didn't break. They forced turnovers, kind of masked the fact that they still gave up a lot of yards in that season. And then we saw them obviously not turn it over, not force turnovers last year. And then we saw all those yardage numbers they gave up last year resulted in points. So I need to see it before I believe it, especially when you're talking about laying almost double digits on the road in your first game with this defense. So I like Stanford here as a dog at home. I also like over the total. I would think this is more of a higher scoring game than a lower one between these two teams. Connor, what do you think here? TCU, Stanford.
Yeah, let's hit on the total real quick. I agree with you. I always totals. I just early on. But this is one you have to look at. Now, TCU last year played to a little bit more unders, but they had crazy totals. It's way high right now in the 60s, even higher. It's like the last 63, 62. They had some high totals, 64. So it's right about there because TCU, both these teams will move the ball. TCU will move it. And one problem with Stanford's defense is the secondary. Dead last. Just got torched all year long. I don't know if it really is going to improve. A lot of these guys are back, but what do we get from that? And the D-line, Tufita is pretty good. They have a few guys that are solid, the D-line and the linebackers for Stanford. And, I'm an Ashton Daniels fan. I think he can do well. He's got a few weapons. You talked about Irvin in the backfield. So I think they could move the ball. And in this game, too, there's a lot of – this is almost that double-digit range for me. Maybe with Stanford, they let me down a ton last year for the most part. But they got their, I think it was the win total, but they had a few covers when they clicked, but when you can't stop anything, it's tough to take. They just couldn't get a stop. And Hoover should be able to do what he wants for TCU. And I don't really trust their defense, as you were just getting to. I don't trust TCU defense really at all. I think they could give up some points in this game. So I lean over. I'd like to look at Stanford. A lot of crazy ones when you go through all these numbers that I found in this one. Like TCU last year was bad off the national championship run, lost a bunch of games on the road consistently, but they've won their last 10 road openers. Stanford's lost their 9 straight at home. There's kind of all these when you run through some of these things that kind of look to TCU, but can they cover? I don't know.
That's it. I'm going to, like I say, I think in this game, given this situation, Stanford being at home, a team, I think they can be competitive. They can be competitive. Mm-hmm. They're going to struggle, this offense, against teams with elite defenses. I still don't think TCU is an elite defense. Stanford's own defense has issues too, but that's also why I like the over. But I think Stanford can do enough offensively against this suspect TCU group to hang around in that game.